By the time you're watching today's video, Trigger should be released, I think. Regardless of the fact, this time I decided to do something a little different. Normally what I would do is I would give you guys a guide. By now that guy would be going over how to play Trigger, what she does, best team, so on and so forth. But Trigger is one of those characters similar to Astra where, I mean, you really just kind of hit a button and then you're done. This doesn't mean that that's all she has. Trigger has a couple different things that she has going for her, and some things you want to do and some things you don't. But after a few tests going back and forth with some of these things that I discovered, I feel like Trigger might be situational. And so what I'm pretty much doing is breaking them down in a way where I kind of go over it team by team. That sounds too formulaic. Not really fun. So in today's video, I'm specifically talking about all the physical DPS units and how they function or work with Trigger, and whether or not they would like their current performing teams or being replaced by Trigger and probably somebody else. The first thing I wanted to do, or the first team I wanted to start off with, was going to be Nekomata, Trigger, and Nicole. Why? Because I really feel like Nekomata just needs a little bit more shine, and she hasn't had that in a little bit. Nekomata's problem was quite a bit, to be fair. Now, she has her own form of grouping or CC control. Why do I always say that? One of y'all called me out on that too. Listen, chill on me, all right? Nekomata has her own form of CC. It's a little bit mild, but it's there. Being able to use dash attack and then the counter dodge to kind of mitigate some things or group some of the characters together, as well as her EX skill. But you really don't want to be using that for CC, which is why we bring Nicole. Now, in Nicole's case, they work hand in hand, both being from the cunning hairs. I think this pair is quite strong. I think they cover each other's weaknesses and they help each other out, but you still need something in the middle. Usually that middle piece would be Anby because she is a stunner, but today we're using Trigger. Now, going over this team wasn't too difficult to play, to be completely honest, but I did find some trouble, being that I'm using Nicole and I'm having to essentially burn EX skills when I don't want to burn EX skills. Now, this isn't inherently Nicole's fault. I think this is more Nekomata's fault because Nekomata just isn't doing enough damage. However, Nekomata's ability to help, or rather cleave through the grouping with Nicole's EX skill, and then also being able to bring in Trigger, having the constant flurry of stun happening at the same time, made up for this team flowing very nice. You guys know me. I love a team that flows very smoothly. They have nice combos or nice strings, nice rotations that mix in together, so it doesn't really feel too useless or too complicated. Now, I tried this team on both different boss sets. One was going to be this Shadow Hugo, which I think is a really cool boss that you guys have probably already experienced throughout the story, but going into end game, I think he's actually pretty cooler. That boss fight in itself was pretty difficult for this team to manage, not because they were weak, but because this boss seems to really want a stunner and a more active stunner, right? Trigger is a stunner that's a little less active because she's off field, and there are situations where of course I'm going to be able to pull her in, but for the most part, having Nekomata on the field, taking advantage of the dash attacks or dodge counters while Trigger was still doing her thing, in theory it should have worked exactly the way that I planned it out, right? I get the stun eventually, I'm doing passive damage over time. Nicole's EX is going to be able to help reduce the defense of this Shadow Hugo, and then I'm going to be able to take him out with Nekomata. Once they get the stun, she's going to cleave all the way through him. We ran into some issues though, and this made me think about whether or not Nekomata actually wants to run an EX, or not an EX, my bad, a two-piece energy, so swing jazz, right? Just so that you have enough build up during the stun window to get another EX skill, and that might be able to help you do like 75 to 80%, somewhere around there. Now, to my own credit, or discredit I should say, this probably was my fault. Maybe I'm just not fighting this character correctly, or maybe Nekomata is just not doing what I need her to do and I'm not piloting her the way that I should be. That being said, I couldn't end it there, so I tried it against a different boss that was a little weaker, to be fair, something that we're kind of already used to, and a little bit more physical reliant, if you will. And this boss was going to be the punchy boy. All right, so punchy boy was a lot more aggro, or rather in the middle. I think, to be fair, Hugo's definitely a lot more aggro, but this guy's a little more controlled. Now, with this particular fight, I was able to test out 3 different variants of the Nekomata team. I tested it with Trigger and Nicole, I tested it with Polkra and Trigger, and then eventually I tested it with Trigger and Astra, which I don't know how I forgot that, to be honest. You guys know me, I don't like Astra, but it was really cool. Now, going over the team overall, this will kind of explain some things for some of the other teams, but mostly Nekomata here. When you get the stun and you line up all the shots, you shred through this enemy like crazy. The main problem being that again, I'm starting to think this is just a Nekomata issue. The way that she works, having to use EX skill back to back or a couple different things, and it feels like her basics are just very weak in comparison to her cleaves. It kind of feels like Nekomata, who is designed for a more single target focus or a single target functioning team, it feels more like she's way better at multi-targeting bosses. And I think that just might be up her alley. She got a lot of dash through moves. She has a lot of good dash or iframes. Her back dash is one of the best in the game. And she has the ability to essentially use a dash attack. If you blink it a certain way, she just zips across the screen to whatever she wants. So even if an enemy is far away from her, you can pretty much instantly zip towards that enemy like a flashed up from Bleach. So the skill or technique behind Nekomata is there, but the damage is not, especially when I'm noticing it from a single target standpoint. But using her EX skill, using her cleaves, her dash attacks, and her dodge counters, when I'm fighting something that's like a pair of bosses, if you will, or a mob of enemies, she annihilates whatever's going on. And I think Trigger actually helps her do that. The constant flurry of electrical attacks, the aftershocks, if you will, because that's what they're called, and her ability to help stun an enemy at the same time is crazy good. Then you add into the fact that Trigger is also acting as a sub DPS character, and it really starts to make things shine. Now, I know I talked a lot about Nekomata, her not doing the damage, but I do want to point out when I'm using Nekomata, Trigger, and Polkra, or Nekomata, Trigger, and Nicole, or Nekomata, Trigger, and somebody else, right? I'm clearing somewhere around 2 minutes, give or take, with Nekomata. The moment I swapped over to Astra, everything changed, and I ended up getting an entire minute clear, or 60 second less, right? Sometimes it was about 30 seconds less, depending on the team. Like with Nicole, I was getting somewhere around like 2 minutes, 158, something like that. But when I swapped to Astra, I was getting around 131, 134, something along those lines. Astra just adds so much to the table. And then also with the quick assist, you're able to get in more activity with Nekomata as well as Trigger and help yourself out. After that, I tried baby girl Jane, and Jane was fun. There was some thoughts that I had with this and some things that I told you guys about before with the whole like Jane, Polkra, and Bernice. And I was able to test that out here. Similar to Jane, Polkra, and Bernice, or Jane and Polkra, I should say, Trigger works the exact same way, except you really don't have that physical addition to the team. However, I do think that having all three of them, right? So Trigger, Polkra, and Jane, I think this works in Jane's favor a little bit more. Now, mind you, she still wants another anomaly character like Bernice or Yanagi. I was gonna say Trinagi, like Trigger and Yanagi, but whatever. Anyway, she still wants another character like that. I think she benefits more from that. However, when you're using Trigger and Polkra, something that I noticed with this particular core is that they work really weird together, and it's like you're constantly going back and forth between Trigger or Polkra, and you really want to go into your DPS character. Eventually, I figured out how this team works. I'm still working out the kinks for it, but for the most part, I have the game plan down. You want Polkra to reverse quick assist, or reverse Q, if we want to shorthand that, into Trigger. Then you want to have enough meter for Trigger to either use her ultimate, her hold basic attack if you're timing the cooldown correctly, or her EX skill, so that you go and reverse quick back into your DPS character. This way, the entire team flows together nicely. So no matter what you're doing, you should always be going in a linear position. Give or take your rotations, if you will. Sometimes, obviously, you have the meter, you have the ultimate, you're going to do it. Polkra is insane. I don't know why we haven't talked about this, or like why this hasn't been a big thing. Polkra's ultimate literally adds like plus 50% to a enemy's stun meter. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why. I don't care. It's nasty. And so when you're playing this team with anybody, really any DPS character, like I said, you're moving in a linear function. So DPS going to Trigger, Trigger goes back into whatever, you're going to parry out, going to Polkra. All different kinds of things can happen. So it's very easy to feel the flow of the team. As far as the damage performance goes, I think this damage performance is okay at best. It's nothing crazy, and I think it's nothing crazy because I didn't run Polkra with an anomaly disc. I should have, and now that I say that out loud, I'm definitely going to test it. But at this moment in time when I'm actually testing this team, I didn't think to do that simply because I was like, Polkra's really not going to be adding an anomaly, when in reality, she's definitely helping contribute so that Jane can get those higher numbers. I believe the highest assault pop that I was able to get with this particular team was somewhere around 700,000. But I do know for a fact Jane is actually able to get up to 1 million, if not higher, depending on who you have on the team and who's doing what. So because of that, I actually ended up testing Jane, Trigger, and Polkra. Not Polkra, Bernice. I ended up testing Jane, Trigger, and Bernice, and I like this team. I think it's cool. Would I use this team over something like Jane, Seth, and Bernice? I'm not entirely too sure. I'll still have to test it out more, but there's a reason for that. Now, you guys know me. I glaze the crap out of Seth. He's one of my favorite characters to play in the game. I will absolutely tell you he's tier 0. Lie or truth, you will never know. Anyway, I think it's cool. I think the difference though is that Seth is a little bit more active, right? I can react to things with my parry, and then after my parry, I get to go into the reverse quick assist. I get to give off shield, so I don't have to worry about anybody dying, and I can buff up both of my anomaly units, essentially making him the glue to the team. In Trigger's case, Trigger feels like a full-on assault, which isn't a bad thing by any means, but you really have to understand what it is that you're doing. I need to pay attention to when Bernice's nitro fuel is going to run out. I want to be able to get her in on the field a little bit more often than I do with Seth, since I don't have that access to the reverse quick assist or to the shield to be able to come out, the EX skill. A lot of the different delays or animations that I showed you guys in my previous video going all over Seth, I don't have access to doing that with Trigger. So it's a little harder to get the full-on offense that way. However, Trigger herself being an off-field stunner and giving me all that access, I literally have a constant flurry of attacks. There is never a time that I'm not attacking with this team. I love it. I think it's super cool. I think it's awesome. I love seeing all the flashes, the yellows, the reds, the blues all over the screen. I think it's crazy. I want more damage though, and I think that might be a thing that I'm gonna have to work on for myself, and eventually we'll figure it out. I'm also not the biggest fan of triple element. I've told you guys that a few times already. Triple element to me is just kind of whack, so maybe instead of Bernice, I'll try this with Yanagi, but who knows, right? Because at that point, I feel like it might just turn into a Yanagi team, but I definitely will try it. And since we're talking about Jane, we can kind of mention Piper here for a little bit, which should be a shorter segment. Piper wasn't too different from Jane. I think they both kind of fell under the same categories. The only difference was I wasn't really using Piper, Trigger, and Pulchra. It didn't really feel the flow. And oddly enough, Pulchra working with the rest of the Sons of Caledon, it just feels like she doesn't work with them, even though she should. And I'm not really understanding why. Again, maybe it's something that I have to do to take more work on or a little bit more studying with, and we'll figure it out. Pulchra works with Bernice, but not if there is like someone else on the team. And I guess to be fair, Piper, Pulchra, and Bernice work, but then Piper, Trigger, and Pulchra felt super weird to play, and mostly because of the energy resource management that you have to go around doing, and you don't really have any offset to Piper. Yeah, Piper's gonna be able to build up energy pretty quickly, but for any other situation, really, she doesn't work like Jane. Jane has the crits to kind of cover her for what she's doing, and then you have the anomaly. Now, in Piper's case, I would absolutely rather have Seth on the team because I'm getting an even larger anomaly boost, therefore giving me the ability to run an attack 4 if I really wanted to do that because of what I'm getting from Seth, and then boosting up the damage that I'm doing on field at the same time. Just like Jane though, running triple element, I'm not going to be able to build up the assaults the way I want to at the speed that I normally can. I mean, yeah, I'm still building them pretty fast, but it's not as fast as normal, or at least as normal as we're used to. Honestly, think it's dealer's choice here, but something that I will mention is that fire and electric usually don't play nice with each other. If something is weak to electric, most often it's not weak to fire, and if something is weak to fire, most often it's resistant to electric. So having all three of them on the same team, or rather having Trigger and Bernice on the same team, usually is counterproductive in some kind of way. And at this point, you would rather as close to a physical Bernice as possible, which could be your Pulchra, given the fact that you might want to run her on anomaly builds instead of crit. But that's something that we have to test out. After the anomaly set, I had the most fun. I'm not even gonna hold you, right? Like I was scratching my head, but I think I had the most fun with Corin, and I was trying to save this for like the very end, but there's something even crazier after Corin that I just didn't expect. But whatever, I played Corin. I don't play Corin. I'm not a Corin main. I have no idea how Corin works. I don't know the Corin tech. By all means, if one of you guys want to let me know all the cool stuff about Corin, send me videos on my Discord. Let me know. But Corin felt crazy. I tried Corin, Trigger, and Rena. Why? Because Rena and Corin work together very nicely. Trigger is going to be electric, so she's going to be able to get what she wants from that too, and she's still activating all of their passives. I also was able to get the pin disc 5 instead of a physical disc with my Corin. Again, I have no idea what I'm doing with Corin. I'm just going off my natural knowledge of the game here, okay? And so with pin 5 plus Rena, I was able to pretty much keep puppets up almost all of the time, as long as I was able to manage what's going on, right? As long as I paid attention to the battlefield, I had puppets on the field at all times, so I can keep my pin up. I got to utilize whatever Corin had. My quick assists were coming out pretty quickly, and Corin, dude, once I popped stun, I don't know what was going on, but Corin just started shredding HP. I've never seen her do that before. Mind you, again, I don't play Corin, but she was taking away at least 40 to 45% of the boss's HP during stun. And outside of stun, she was doing anywhere from like 20 to 25, give or take whatever's going on. I felt like Trigger definitely helps her out. Corin's one of those characters that wants to stay on the field a little bit longer, but due to the high aggro of the enemies, whether that be Shadow Hugo or Punchy Guy, Corin still wasn't able to stay on the field as long as I wanted her to. So it kind of defeated the purpose of having Trigger on the team in the theoretical sense, right? Not like the practical, I'm not getting the use out of Trigger, but I mean that I could have stunned faster, therefore giving me more opportunity to bring Corin in during the stun windows, because Corin's coming out anyway, very little on the field. Rena's Rena. I really don't think I have to talk too much about her. She's okay. Not okay. Rena's great, don't get me wrong, but in this particular team setup, Rena was just Rena for the most part, but I did enjoy being able to get off some shocks between Rena and Trigger constantly attacking on the enemy. Rena's ultimate as well as her EX skill were having some forms of CC with the mobs, so that kind of helped out too. But against the enemy, I really had no form of CC. I wasn't able to lock him down in the same way that I would be able to do with like a Seth or with Evelyn's chain attack, Soldier 11's EX skill, so on and so forth. With all of that said, I defaulted to the one character I don't like playing with because I feel like she's cheating, but I get it, especially after today. I played Corin, Trigger, and Astra, and I thought Corin doing like 40-something% during stun was crazy. When I put Astra on the team, that 40-something% almost doubled. At one point, whenever I fought the punchy guy, I almost one-shot his entire HP. Like, and when I say almost one-shot it, I mean, if I knew what I was doing with Corin, I'm pretty positive I could have taken him out. This became so clear to me when I got a minute and 30-something clear on the punchy guy. I might have been able to sub 60-second this had I known what I was doing with this team. Astra felt like she really helped keep Corin on the field. Not specifically because of the whole like I'm needing to constantly swap in and out, which I was doing before with Rena, but more along the lines of like Astra's not really a character that's on the field, so you don't really use her. And because I'm able to quick assist in and out of Trigger, what this allowed me to do was get off more EX skills, or I was able to just, you know, basic attack a couple times and then go right back into Corin, which essentially saved it. A lot of the times though, which was completely accidental by the way, I was able to go Corin, a couple basic attacks, go into Trigger with the parry, and then the very first attack Trigger did would trigger the super quick assist, getting me right back into Corin, and I was able to appear behind the enemy. What was even better about this team was because I was constantly swapping in between Corin and Trigger, I was actually building up stun a lot faster than I was when I had Rena on the team. So by the time around like maybe 40 or 50 seconds passively went by with this team, I was able to get my first stun. During that entire stun, like I said, I shredded through guys, I shredded that HP, bro. It was crazy. At least 50%, right? I want to tell you 60, but I'm just eyeballing the red meter from the green meter. That's all it is. The team was crazy. The damage was insane. I actually had a lot of fun playing that team. It was pretty cool. It allowed me to see more about why Astra is revered the way she is, even though I called it and even though I knew she was going to be a problem to the game. Not a bad problem for players, but a problem in the future, which eventually we'll deal with that, right? But as of right now, Astra's cracked, and having the ability to play Astra and Trigger to help further elevate a lot of these characters that just don't get shine like Corin, it's really nice. Being able to clear, especially from like a free-to-play perspective, I can see the Astra Nicole core, which is the ether combo. I see that as a free-to-play combo, right? Or something closer to free-to-play. But if you were to elevate that a little bit more, I feel like Astra and Trigger allow you to take any of these DPS characters to another level, depending on whatever combo you have. Some characters obviously don't care about Trigger, but we'll talk about that in a different video. The final character that I wanted to go over was my boy Billy. All right, shout out to Jimbo because he's been on me about this character. I have no idea what I'm doing with Billy. Again, I don't main these characters. I don't even dabble in the thought of these characters, but to be able to play this team, I went with the same process, except now I understood just play Astra, Billy, Trigger, and Astra, bro. And when I tell you very similar results to Corin, I just playing with Billy was kind of cool. Why? Because whenever I popped Astra, I was able to quick assist. Billy does his swoom, 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 like he's doing the Deadpool stuff, right? The spin moves. And I'm like, that's sick. But guess what? While he's doing spin moves, I was able to go on a Trigger. Trigger keeps loading up her energy, which is crazy for me. And then I was able to accidentally get these quick dodges or whatever, and Billy has something cool that I really didn't pay attention to before. So you guys know Billy has the rolling dodge or rolling basic attack, right? Where if you tilt left or right, whatever direction, it's omnidirectional by the way, you can tilt wherever you want, But whenever you tilt while he's shooting, he will spin off and do a couple different spins, some bullets, and then he'll do one final attack. Now, in my head, I thought you had to hold the basic attack button the entire time, but actually you don't. Something really cool about that was the fact that I was able to spin move off, which would trigger a dodge counter, if you will, or you know, like the witch time. I was able to then go into my trigger, literally with either a parry or whatever the case may be, and then I was able to go back into Billy, which I think I had maybe 1 or 2 instances of this happening. But why this is cool is because this allowed me to trigger the stun, the daze with Billy while Trigger was still performing her action because he was already on the field. There's some mumbo jumbo science to that, doesn't really matter. Point being is that whenever I stun the enemy, bang, bang, 2 EX skills, 50% gone, just like that. I had no idea Billy had this much strength behind him. And if we're like, look, this isn't a chillers video, right? But if we're just for a moment, if we're talking about how powerful, how much power Astra brings into a character's kit, right? Like the elevation that she provides. I'm not gonna hold you. I think it's time we move Billy out of tier 3, tier 4, wherever he is. Billy doing work, okay? If the enemy is weak to physical, bang, bang, and they're gone. I've never seen this. I've never seen Billy annihilate an enemy like that. And then I understand, right? Trigger played a huge part in doing a lot of this, bro. Billy, Trigger, and Astra might be the new team. Like coming from like, this isn't even free to play. I can't call it free to play. You have 2 powerful limited characters on your team. And of course, I'm rocking the W engines on both, but wow. Overall, I have to say that like my impressions for Trigger alone, really being added into every single physical unit, I think it was pretty cool. If I had to tier them in terms of like who had the most use, of course, we just got through talking about Billy and Corin. They're number 1. These 2 characters in particular feel like they benefited the most from Trigger from the physical unit standpoint. I think after that, I can actually add Nekomata in as the number 2 or like number 3 spot in this particular case. And then I'll say Jane benefits a little bit more than what Piper would, but Jane is a little bit in the middle, right? I think if you're looking for something that's a lot more aggro, you don't really have to worry about the defensive parries or anything like that, and getting your shields or any kind of tech, if you will, then Trigger and Jane would be the go-to option for that, which would put her up there, right? But if you're comfortable playing Jane and her already strongest fork anomaly teams, then you're fine, right? You keep using Seth and you call it a day. One of the things that we do have to pay attention to is the fact that we simply just don't have any physical weak units, and we haven't had them for a long time. I'm hoping in the next couple of patches we're getting that, but as right now it's very difficult, right? Like floor 6 in Shiyu, and then maybe like floor 4 or something like that usually have the physical weak enemies. We haven't had a physical weak DA boss or deadass, right? Deadly Assault. We haven't had a physical weak one ever. If I'm really trying to think of the physical weak one that we had in there because I can't remember one. So it's hard to test them over there in Deadly Assault as well. Tower is a little bit different because Tower is all over the place, right? You have tons of different things in Tower that could be physical weak, and eventually I'll test them over there with time, of course. But as of right now, if you happen to be a main for any of these characters, Trigger is a damn good pull. I like this character. I want to test Trigger with the electric units next. So like Yanagi and Sanbi, which I've done Sanbi. I think it's kind of like normal. Like she just works hand in hand. She's going to improve Sanbi tremendously, but I do want to see how she works with some of the other characters. I really don't want to test her with Miyabi. I'm kind of like for telling you guys that now, not because I think it's bad. Miyabi is just like, if Astra is the upper echelon of the supports, Miyabi is the upper echelon of the DPS characters. She works with whatever she wants to as long as you know how to play the character of the team, right? So I feel like it's kind of pointless to do it that way, but we'll do that whenever it comes to that point. Anyway, I got to edit this video and get it done before like the release so that I can edit it or like release it on time because I was away for like a week or something. Anyway, I can't say my user outro B is inappropriate for YouTube. Like the video, comment, subscribe. I'll see you later. Oh, and good luck on your trigger pulls. I can end that off with a pretty nice, you know what I mean.